providing some information today that you need to know. He does it as a ministry. He's going to share more details about himself, but David Gibbs III. Excuse me.
And good morning. How many are alive and well? Let me see your hand. How many are morning people? Let me see the morning people. Okay. How many believe it ought to be legal to shoot those people? Let me see your hand. All right. That's kind of the coffee crew. You know, I'm a person that does not like $3 and $4 gasoline, but a $4 cup of coffee makes sense to me. Okay. If I drink it, I will pay by the cup for it. But certainly honored and delighted to be here. Now, seeing a lot of familiar faces, seeing a lot of good friends, but also some new faces. How many are hearing me for the first time in your life? Let me see your hand. Okay, good number of first-timers. Well, it is certainly an honor to be here. I'm an attorney with the National Center for Life and Liberty. How many believe our lives and our liberties are under attack in America? And have been in this nonprofit legal ministry. And by the way, how many believe the words attorney and words for free don't always connect up so naturally? Okay, so it is a calling on our staff and our team. We are officed over in St. Petersburg, Florida, so we're just across the bay here. We also have an office in Texas, California, North Carolina, and Washington, D.C. And by the way, how many believe Washington needs some help right now? And so we are serving across the nation. Kind of fall into three categories. Number one, I litigate cases. I go to court. We defend churches like yours. Now, how many have as a goal not going to prison? May I see your hand, please? Okay, so set the bar somewhere and you can hit it. So we defend churches like yours. Our goal is to protect your rights. And how many have figured out with what the Supreme Court's doing, our rights are under attack right now? And so we are litigators on your behalf. A lot of folks remember the Terry Shivo case. How many remember that case from 10 years ago? And we were the lead counsel on that. That case actually set a record, kind of a sad record, the only case in history to go to the Supreme Court and back twice in 10 days. And I do remind you, as we defend life across the country, how many believe if you don't defend innocent life, you have no liberty in this country? You know, our founding fathers kind of understood that concept. They came from a government. The king held life and death in his hands. If the king said, "Off with your head," how many believe that was not a good day for you? Okay, what did it mean? The government, the king, just said, "You die." Okay, no rights, no appeals, nothing. It was done. You could be a threat to him. You could be just a bother, but there was no protection. That's why our founders, when they came over here, said, you know, if we're really going to have free speech, freedom of religion, right to defend ourselves, all these other things, doesn't it start with the protection of innocent life? And that's why they talked about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so we defend those cases across the nation. We also advocate on behalf of governmental entities. We just had a brief up before the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals on prayers in Jesus' name. How many believe the secular world hates the name Jesus? You say, David, why do they hate Jesus so much? It's real simple. Jesus said there's only one way to heaven.
Amen.
Now, how many agree with Jesus on that?
Amen.
And if you don't agree with that, you're lost, my friend, and we'll try to lead you to Christ today. But the reality is that message of exclusivity, the salvation in Jesus Christ, is what is so hated in our modern day. You know, we're in a world right now that says, I have my way, you have your way, but in the end, it's all just going to kind of wash out. How many believe the problem with that is it runs contrary to the Word of God? Yes. Jesus was pretty clear. He said, no man, how many believe that's no woman, no child, nobody comes to the Father but by me, referring to himself as the Son of God. So we're honored many times when we go to court, while I may be representing you or your church, how many believe we're also representing Jesus Christ? Yes. And we're defending his name and his message and his book. And so it is our joy to litigate cases. Number two, we do public policy. We work in Washington, D.C. We certainly appreciate the great work. How many appreciate the video and the testimony of the folks up in Washington? And by the way, kind of a neat thing. Brother, how many did you lead to Christ during the time up there?
Yeah, 6,314.
6,000 people, 314 came to know Jesus Christ during that evangelistic campaign. And can I explain, there's lots of lobbyists in Washington. How many believe we need some Christians in Washington? Some folks that are going to speak the truth. And we are meeting with the Congress each and every week, and part of our goal is to be your voice. We deal with faith and family issues, certainly, but we also just try to remind the Congress about real-world issues. Many of the congressmen are wealthy, and they forget what it's like to have a house payment, a car payment, and many times they'll ask me, Speaker of the House John Boehner will say, David, tell me what the people in the churches are saying. And so we try to be almost like a conduit, a voice. We say, here's what folks in the pews are saying, here's what real people are saying, here's what jurors are saying, because real Americans feel disconnected from Washington. And so we try to be your voice and let them feel connected with where the concerns are of the people in your churches and congregations. And by the way, how many believe we need to remind Washington of what's going on? And so we are organizing pastors and others to go up to D.C. If that's something that interests you, let me know. You can send me an email. But we're going to try to take about 1,000 pastors a year up to Washington, D.C. to remind the Congress. And by the way, how many believe they need to remember we exist? There are people who preach Jesus, who believe marriage should be defined as Genesis chapter 1. By the way, how many believe God had a pretty good plan when he made man and woman in the garden? That was before sin entered into the world. Don't let people hand you this theological nonsense that, the Bible speaks of polygamy and there's incest and adultery. There's a whole litany of sin. But how many believe that was after sin entered into the world?
Right.
Remember, God had a real good plan in Genesis 1, and American law used to reflect God's best. How many believe we don't any longer reflect God's best? And so we want pastors and others to remind our leaders in Washington we are there, and we are going to be pushing for legislation to protect church rights. How many believe churches ought to stay tax exempt? Churches ought to be free to speak and to share and to preach even messages that are unpopular. So we are going to continue being your voice, and I'm going to need more of you to show up. Now, we don't want the toothless weirdo from your church. How many believe that guy's not a great image? You say, yeah, he's unemployed, he's not real bright, but he'll do whatever I tell him to do. All right, don't send him to Washington with Attorney Gibbs, okay? I'm going to be asking for your church to send you, okay, or leadership you trust. Okay, I don't mind if it's your board chairman, maybe you have a real savvy associate, it may not have to be the senior pastor, but we're looking for one or two that can actually go on television and speak a cohesive sentence. Because how many believe we need to maintain our image in Washington? We want them to understand that this is not, just backwoods, hick, unsophisticated redneck. You say, you just described my whole church. Well, we still want to be there where they have some understanding that we are wanting to reach our communities, make a difference. And so we are going to keep you posted on that. But we litigate cases, we work in Washington. And then number 3, we try to be a voice in the culture. My dear friend at Moody Radio. And by the way, how many appreciate Moody Radio? Let's give them a hand. Phenomenal, great work. And we are, by the way, that treasured gift of Moody Radio is not all over the country. They have a huge footprint. They cover much of the nation, but don't take it for granted. You go to some areas, there's not a lot of solid Christian radio in terms of, good information, good preaching, good music, the whole litany. We're blessed with that through Moody Radio. But we work through Moody Radio. I do Fox News, other media. I speak in churches, if some of you would be kind enough. I'm glad to come to your church on a Sunday. That is a help to the ministry to garner support and lets us do what we're doing. Do seminars like these. The goal of today is to give you some information. Now, in the hour we have together, I can only throw some nuggets at you. We'll take some questions, and I may spark you up a little bit. And go, whoa, we've got some issues here, some things to worry about. But how many would rather learn about it here as opposed to the courthouse? And so we try to prevent legal problems. We try to take issues that are impacting churches. And then I do want you to know the NCLL is available to you. We come alongside churches who say we will support your ministry. And I look around the room and there are churches here that support us, and you can talk to them and ask them what the experience is. But what we do is our team of attorneys will then become your general counsel. And what we do is, like, if you have a question or an issue, you get a nasty letter or somebody threatens to sue. And by the way, how many believe America's gone lawsuit crazy? I mean, everybody, oh, I'm going to sue, or you've done me wrong, or you owe me. And you know what you can say? You know what, brother, I don't want to argue with you. I'm going to turn this over to my attorney. And a lot of times people go, oh, you actually have an attorney? Yeah, he'll handle it. You negotiate with them. And you know what? A lot of those problems go away because those people are trying to bully you, bother you, hassle you. And how many don't have time for unnecessarily stupid people? Can I see your hand, please? Well, we are certainly glad to come alongside and to serve and take those burdens off of you. We also review your documents, your guidelines, your handbooks, your bylaws. How many believe a good church is a well-run church? You say, well, we just kind of schluck it together. How many believe if you're doing something for Jesus, it ought to be done excellently? And that he is worthy of our absolute best, and that needs to be how we move forward. And so we want to partner with you. You say, David, we don't have a dime in the world. Well, then we will stand with you and help cover you. But if you can help support, that's how we operate the ministry. That's how we are able to go forward. And so I am going to encourage you later on. We won't do it right now because I'm going to talk about some things. But when you fill out the All-Pro Pastor's card, we're only asking you to fill out the one card because historically we've had 2 or 3 cards and you all fill out parts of all of them, but none of them. And so if you would be kind enough to fill it out, and then we will make sure all of you get our information, our newsletter, we'll email you, we have a resource of the month, we will stay connected with you, and we want to do that. Now, I want to hit some of the legal topics, but then I'm going to go to an open forum. So you all are welcome to drive the situation wherever you would like. But let's start with a couple that are in the news, okay? How many believe church security is in the news? Okay, Charleston, a very sad situation. Somebody walks into the building and shoots, and we have horrible loss of life. It's a terrible travesty. We'd all agree that is a very bad thing. And my phones are exploding right now with people calling and saying, what do we do to keep our buildings safe? And I want to kind of just hit some of the things as you're thinking about church security and protecting your members and your attenders. A couple of things. Number one, about once a week, there is a church shooting in America. Okay, the big nasty ones hit the news. Most of them you don't hear about. So it's about 50 times a year. Now you say, well, that's a lot. Well, it is and it isn't. Okay, so I want to let you know it is a little bit of a rarer risk. Okay, but it is certainly something that's happening once a week in the United States of America. Most church shootings are not terrorist or hate motivated, as Charleston was. Somebody trying to make a statement or trying to do something overtly evil. Most of them are domestic disputes. How many figured out our families are a mess in America right now? Okay, and what is church? It's kind of a place where they get together and they're not at work. And so sometimes the temptation to shoot one another strikes them. Okay, and so most of your shootings are domestic related. They know each other. It's an ex, it's an in-law, it's a new boyfriend, it's a whole litany, but somebody's going to take things out at church. And so that's most of them would fall into that category. Now, you're a smart group, so you're sitting here thinking about church risk, okay? You don't have to worry maybe as much about the different, organizations that hate churches in our community. Sometimes you just want to look at your own families. And if kind of a hot-headed former Marine that's wearing 12 guns is mad, and he's just gone through a bad situation, you may want to have a conversation with him. Okay, because you can do preventive things, and you can ask people like that not to attend or not to bring weapons, and so you can do some profiling. How many believe the government can't profile? We can. Okay, so if you see somebody that you think is just a little, right now, edgy or a little off balance or bringing too many weapons to church for your comfort, you do have the ability, you don't have to wait for them to lose it and do something. You can proactively approach people. So most of these disputes are going to be in the domestic family. You're going to know these people. They're not going to be strangers to you. Now, here's kind of the black letter law. We're talking liability here. Is if somebody walks into your church, and let's even take the Charleston situation, and shoots, okay, you are not liable. Now, why are you not liable? Because it's an intervening criminal act that the law would say is not foreseeable. Okay, now obviously that applies not just to churches, that applies to Walmart, that applies to hotels, that applies to public gatherings. I mean, if you're at a ball stadium and somebody picks up a gun and starts shooting, okay, there is not an inherent liability for someone that just shows up criminally and does something bizarre. You would say, well, we just had no way, we had no control. It was just a criminal act that came into our world. Now, here's the reverse. If your security team shoots somebody, how many believe you are liable? Okay, so I do want you to understand you're kind of dealing with a competing risk factor. Okay, somebody coming in shooting, you want to protect your congregation. I agree with you. But if your security team does something unwise, there is liability. I mean, many of you saw in the news a couple years back, it was very sad, over in St. Pete, Pastor Kelly's daughter, okay, the security guy had a gun out, okay, was showing it to people. Now, how many believe showing guns around is not a good idea at church? Okay, and they did something, went in a closet, okay, how many believe that's not smart either? No line of sight, but they didn't want to scare people. And they removed the cartridge, how many believe that was smart? But how many can think of an unwise thing they did? They forgot to clear the chamber. So there's a live round sitting in the weapon. So they're handling it, showing it around to these kids, and one kid says, can I pull the trigger? Well, sure, it's not loaded. It's got a real nice feel, and all of a sudden, as he puts back on this little Ruger, real small, easy to carry gun, the thing about blows up in his hand, because they don't expect the explosion or the noise. Well, what happens, unfortunately, is that bullet goes through the real thin closet wall and catches the pastor's daughter point blank range in the back of the head. And either way, she lives. Obviously, many of you watched and prayed. She was on a life support over at Bayfront for 8 days, and she would die from the head wound to the bullet that went into her brain. And remember too, our security team doesn't carry minimal ammo. We carry the fragmenting, exploding, stop a gorilla ammo. So when we do accidentally shoot people, generally the injuries are exacerbated, not minimized. So please understand there is liability if we accidentally shoot an innocent. So as church leadership, how many believe we have some balancing here? In terms of we want to keep our churches safe, but on the other hand, we don't want Barney Fife. Now, how many know what I mean when I say Barney Fife? Okay, that's the guy that he wants to carry a gun, he's excited to have a gun, he's looking forward to this, and this is his moment. You know, he could never get a job as a cop, but now he's packing with the congregation. Okay, well, that's the balance that you have to deal with. Now, let me give you a couple of things. The Second Amendment. How many love the Second Amendment? Okay, the Second Amendment says you have the right to bear arms. Our Supreme Court, for some bad things it has done, has taken a pretty strong Second Amendment support. What they have said, it is an individual right to bear arms. You are protected. You have the right to defend yourself. And by the way, that is biblical. How many believe if life and liberty is in jeopardy, you should be able to protect yourself? So churches now have to decide, where do we want to fall on this continuum, okay? And I am telling you right now, security plans are like people. They're all a little different. And you have the right in the church to decide what works best for you. So let me give you a couple of options, some things to think about. Number one, don't recommend this. It's a choice. It's something you can do. You do have the right to ban guns. Okay, you do have that right. You can put a sign up. You can say, no guns allowed. You can just declare your church as a gun-free zone. Now, for some churches that does make sense, okay, because the reality is where you're at in an inner city or where you're at in a certain area, it just is better for you to just say, we don't allow guns on the property. If somebody shows up with a gun, they could be criminally trespassed and removed. Much like courthouses, much like airports, you have the right to declare yourself gun-free. Now, again, I'm giving you choices. Some of you are looking at me like, bless God, we're all packing, and you have that right, okay? So don't, but I just want you to know the range of options, okay? You have the right to ban them. Number two, you have the right to allow them, okay? And some of you do. I mean, your thought is everybody in the church is packing, any bad guy shows up, we're gonna have so many bullets flying, it'll just eliminate all the problems. And by the way, that is a model, more of a rural model, okay, where you are, people are more comfortable with weapons, the church kind of knows who's there, and so that is certainly an option. Now, if you're going to go with that option, I do recommend that you at least keep your services sort of predictable. You don't want to ever do anything to spook your crowd, okay? I mean, all of a sudden the lights go down, smoke comes in the back, here's the baby Jesus coming in, and all of a sudden 3 people draw and take him out. Okay, I mean, sometimes you may just want to announce, okay, we're going to do a special event. Everybody relax. Matter of fact, even joke a little bit, take your hand off the trigger, because we are going to dim the lights, run smoke, have people come in from the back. It's going to be loud, it's going to be noisy, but it's all part of the plan. So if you are going to kind of go with the congregational approach, you certainly want to be sure that you keep your services sort of predictable and don't do anything to spook the crowd. All right, then you have the option of limited armed resistance, which is, we don't really want the congregation packing, but we are going to have a security team. And lots of churches are going into this model. And there are certain things with your security team that you want to think about. Obviously, training is important. Many security teams have law enforcement on them. Now, I like law enforcement maybe a little better on the typical church security team than military. Okay, I love military. If you're a military veteran here, I love you too. But just as somebody that heads it up, okay, as a general rule, if you have the option, law enforcement is trained not to shoot innocent people. Okay, military is trained to clear the terrain. Okay, it's just a little different training. Okay, I mean they just get less training on innocent people are in the mix. The cop doesn't just walk into Walmart and start shooting everything. Okay, when you're at war in the field, laying on your belly, you do shoot at everything. And so there is a little more sophistication to the law enforcement training than military training. That's not to disparage what they receive, it's just a different environment. So if you have your choice, if you're a bigger church, you have options. Having somebody that has law enforcement training involved in your security team is important. Now, security plans. You take this team, you want to put together a plan. A couple of things, very, very location specific, okay? You take a building like this, okay, you have to evaluate all the ingress, all the egress, the neighborhood, where we're at. So you can't just say, here's a cookie cutter, one size fits all. If you're the old church model, everybody walks in the back, goes down the big chute, there's the church, that's an easier building to secure than a big campus that has doors everywhere. And so you have to do a property assessment. Where are our risks? Now, here's what I want you to understand if you want to keep things safer, okay? Delay, and when I talk about delay, I mean the guy moving in that wants to do something bad. Delay saves lives. So, for example, a very common part of a security plan is once the service begins, all these doors are locked. Okay, now what does that do? Well, it delays a bad guy. Okay, he's coming at the building, he's trying to come in, that door, it's locked, he can't get in. Okay, or he tries to go to this door. And what are we doing? We're slowing down, somebody may spot him. We're also making him funnel into a entrance that we can monitor, where we can see that he's coming. And so remember, one of the common things with delay is it will save lives. Anything you can do to slow down the movement of this person will make them unable to shoot, unable to harm, and hopefully give law enforcement or your security team opportunity to respond. Now, with your teachers, your children's workers, you're not going to be able to drill this, but you should at least train it. What do we do if we go into a live shooter situation? Now, if you have schools, you probably do want to drill it, okay? Because you got the kids there, you can actually practice it. Generally, Sunday school, VBS, those type of things, can't practice it. But there's a couple common components. Let me give them to you. Number one, recognize the sound. What does a sound? Most people think gun shows up, it's loud, it sounds like an Uzi on TV. As a general rule, that's not what it sounds like. Most people will testify it sounded like firecrackers in the building. Okay, pop, 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 pop. Okay, that's more often than not the sound. Now, that's an important training element because remember, delay saves lives. So what you want to do is if one of your workers, teachers says, man, I just heard firecrackers go off in the building, they need to go, wait a minute, we don't have firecrackers in the building. Okay, that's a bad thing, that's a bad sound, that's not a good sound. And what you want them to do is go into lockdown. Now what is lockdown? Number one, we lock the door. Okay, remember, delay, the guy tries to get in. If we can, we move furniture in front of the door. This is not orderly, this is not decorative, this is slam the desk, throw some chair, anything you can do to barricade the door, because if the person does try to come through, they are moving forward. Number three, we have the children lie down on their stomachs and play dead. Number one, the kids can't see, which means they will be quiet. Okay, you don't want them looking at the ceiling giggling. You want them laying on the ground looking like they are dead. A couple of reasons for this. Number one, the guy may look in and think he's already shot. Okay, many of these shooters are high on drugs, alcohol, other substances. They aren't keeping a careful inventory of who they've shot. So they will look in sometimes and think, I've already been here, or these kids are already dead. Number two, if he does try to shoot, or does try to get through the window, or does something, you have the kids in the best position to protect the most dangerous head and heart fatal blows. So you have where if they do get shot, it's a way tougher angle for them to get out. The worst thing you can do, for example, is run the kids in the hallway, there's the shooter, and you've just created target practice because he's now got the best angle to create the greatest amount of injury. So the kids laying down on their stomach, pretending they're dead, and just sit still. That is oftentimes in lockdown drill the best way to preserve life. Now, if you hear the popping running away from you and you have a window and you're on a ground floor, obviously escape the building and start moving. Okay, that makes sense. But these are the kind of things that in your security planning, it's very location specific, it's very teacher specific, it's how you are going to be set up in the event of an emergency. Now, as you are dealing with this, you also need to make sure that you know what type of resistance you are going to provide. Interesting, churches that have drilled, okay, and they spent money for this, okay, they actually, you know, I mean, they know it's a drill, but it's really kind of cool, you know, it's sort of role-playing. I mean, a bad guy shows up at the church, you know, in theory, unannounced sometime during the day, they know it's going to happen, and then he's doing bad things. In theory, they're not really hurting, but he's running around with like a laser type thing that tracks what he can get away with, and then the church tries to respond. Okay, so it's kind of cool training. What they have found with churches who do that is the church people generally end up killing each other. Because you don't quite realize the adrenaline rush that is occurring. Again, back to law enforcement training, people that have been trained to ease their nerves, make assessments, shoot, don't shoot. But the people that are running around for the first time waving a gun, it's just kind of an energy, and they're shooting all over the place. And as a general rule, the bad guys get away with it. So you do want to be thinking about, okay, what type of resistance are we going to have? And I always recommend your first role of resistance is call 911. How many believe getting professional law enforcement there is always a good idea? Now that doesn't mean you're not going to respond yourself also. And by the way, we have had cases, I mean, you probably saw in the news, our friend over in Orlando was dismissing an employee that proceeded to try to kill him, and you know, and so, I mean, he had to defend himself, and there was no time to call or do anything. But we're talking, you know, you've got somebody in the building, you don't know who it is, you don't know where they're at, you don't know what they're doing. Obviously, you want to get 911 dialed. You say, I don't even have time to talk. Hit 911, leave it laying on the floor. And you say, well, what if somebody else calls? The best thing in the world would be 50 911 calls. because they will jump on that and they will send more and they will understand that they're in a crisis situation. So you want to make sure that as you are looking at your security plan, you decide what level of resistance, who's going to resist, who is authorized by the church, because do remember there is a liability for what these people may or may not do. Now, lots of information in a short, condensed time period, but any questions on church security or anything that you guys are working on or ruminating over? Yes, ma'am, nice and loud. I'll come by. Go ahead.
Doctor, we see your prophetic.
The Lord.